At 12:41 a.m. on December 9, 2010, the front desk of Soho House in Manhattan received a complaint from a guest on the ninth floor. Water was dripping from their ceiling, staining the drywall above their bed. The issue seemed routine, an overflowing tub, maybe a broken pipe. Two hotel security officers were dispatched to investigate. They followed the water trail upward to room 20. The room was booked under the name of Sylvie Cachet, a fashion designer from the West Village. They knocked twice. No answer. The water could be heard faintly through the door, steady and continuous. Protocol allowed access in the event of property damage, so one of the officers slid a master key card through the reader. The door unlocked with a soft click. The lights were on. The air smelled faintly of floral bath oils, but also something chemical, chlorine or bleach. A woman's handbag was on the bed. The bedsheets were undisturbed. They followed the sound of running water to the bathroom. The door was open. What they saw stopped them cold. A woman was face down in the bathtub. The faucet was still running, overflowing the tub onto the tile, then the carpet. She was fully clothed from the waist up, gray wool turtleneck, gold Rolex on her wrist, red lace underwear exposed beneath the waterline. Her head was submerged. One arm hung stiffly over the side of the tub, fingertips just grazing the floor. No movement, no breathing, no signs of life. Emergency services were called immediately. NYPD officers from the 6th Precinct arrived at the scene by 1:09 a.m., followed by EMTs who pronounced the woman deceased. Her name, confirmed by ID found in the room and hotel check-in records, was Sylvie Cachet, 33 years old. A well-known designer in certain Manhattan circles, she had previously worked with brands like Tommy Hilfiger and Victoria's Secret before launching her own swimwear line, Sila. The initial scene was strange. There was no sign of forced entry, no overturned furniture, no obvious indication of a violent altercation. The hotel door lock record showed no entries after 12:32 a.m. The room was quiet, calm, but the details didn't sit right with the first responders. The body position was unnatural. The fact that she was clothed and wearing a watch in the tub raised red flags. Water temperature was lukewarm by the time police arrived. Livor mortis had already begun in the lower extremities, but rigor was not yet fully set. The bathtub was drained on site under supervision. Investigators noted a bruise on the left side of the neck and slight petechial hemorrhaging in the eyes, subtle but present. The preliminary assumption shifted immediately from accidental drowning to suspicious death. The coroner's office was notified, and a request for a full autopsy was logged before 3 a.m. The hotel room was sealed as a crime scene. Detectives found no sign of drug paraphernalia or weapons. No suicide note. Her purse had been unzipped but not rifled through. Inside was her wallet, phone, lipstick, and a pair of sunglasses. A travel-size bottle of Advil lay near the edge of the sink. There were 2 wine glasses in the room, one with smudged lipstick, the other clean. Both were rinsed, but still damp. There was no luggage, just a handbag and a black leather coat draped over the back of a chair. Down at the front desk, investigators requested the room's check-in log and visitor registry. The staff reported that Sylvie Cachet had checked in earlier that evening, shortly before 10:30 p.m., with a man. They were seen arguing at the front desk, but nothing violent or overt enough to raise alarm at the time. Security footage was pulled for review. Meanwhile, the guests staying in the room below were relocated for the night. Hotel management provided names of all staff on duty. Housekeeping confirmed the room had been cleaned that morning, nothing unusual noted. The bathroom faucet had no maintenance history, no leaks, no broken fixtures. The FDNY incident log from earlier that same day revealed that a small fire had broken out in Cachet's personal apartment, uptown on Jane Street. It was caused by a lit candle left unattended near bedding materials. No injuries were reported. The fire department closed the case as accidental. But now, with her body found in a hotel tub hours later, the timeline demanded closer scrutiny. As sunrise neared, investigators began reconstructing the last 24 hours of Sylvie Cachet's life. They started with the person she checked in with. When detectives pulled the file on Sylvie Cachet, the preliminary facts painted a clear picture. Born in Arlington, Virginia in 1977, she was the daughter of a Peruvian father and an American mother. By 2010, she was 33 years old and working as a swimwear designer in New York City. She lived in a 1-bedroom apartment on Jane Street in the West Village. No history of violence, no documented mental illness, no known enemies. Cachet had been employed by high-profile brands, including Tommy Hilfiger and Victoria's Secret, before launching her own label, Sila, in 2006. The brand had received coverage in several lifestyle and fashion outlets, including Sports Illustrated, which featured one of her designs in its annual swimsuit edition. Friends described her as driven, meticulous, and hyper-focused on building a sustainable business, but they also acknowledged that the business had been under financial strain in recent months. She was carrying the weight of overhead, limited production, and inconsistent investor backing. A few months prior to her death, Sylvie had confided in a friend that she was considering closing her brand entirely. According to interviews conducted by the NYPD's Midtown North detectives, she had mentioned burnout and a feeling that the company wasn't going anywhere. Her social media presence, while curated and professional, had grown less active by late fall. Bank records, obtained later through a subpoena, confirmed a declining balance across her personal and business accounts. Her last rent payment had been made, but no new business transactions were recorded in the days leading up to December 9th. Financial hardship alone did not raise flags, but it provided necessary context. She wasn't at the top of her career when she checked into Soho House. She was, however, still a public figure in small but influential circles. She had access to elite networks, attended high-profile events, and was well known in the downtown fashion and hospitality communities. Her death would not be brushed aside as an accident without scrutiny. Investigators began mapping out her close contacts. The initial focus was on recent social connections, people she worked with, dated, or spoke to regularly. Phone records revealed multiple outgoing calls to one individual in particular during the week prior to her death. The number belonged to a 24-year-old man she had been romantically involved with for approximately 6 months. Hotel staff confirmed that this same man had checked in with her on the night of December 8th. His name was recorded on surveillance logs and verified through state-issued ID, Nicholas Brooks. Detectives ran Brooks through the system. No prior arrests, no active warrants. His father, Joseph Brooks, was a former Oscar-winning songwriter. Publicly, the family maintained an image of privilege and access. Privately, things were more fractured. Joseph Brooks had been under investigation for multiple sexual assault allegations stemming from fraudulent casting calls. Nicholas was not implicated in those cases, but the association was noted. Nicholas had no current employment listed, nor did he have a steady source of income. According to acquaintances interviewed during the early phase of the investigation, he lived off a trust fund and split his time between his father's properties and upscale hotels. He was often seen in nightlife venues and bars. One witness referred to him as a drifter who always seemed to have someone paying his tab. A second stated he lived out of backpacks and luxury gyms. In text messages recovered from Sylvie's phone, some sent within 48 hours of her death, she expressed frustration and distrust. One message read, "You used my card again. I told you not to do that. I'm serious this time." Another said, "I don't feel safe. I want you gone. This isn't love." She had not reported him to police, but she had sent multiple warning texts indicating financial exploitation and a breakdown of trust. Several of her friends later confirmed that she had threatened to break up with Brooks before. They believed she stayed in the relationship out of emotional dependency, or possibly fear. One of her closest contacts, name withheld for privacy, told detectives that Sylvie was afraid to be alone in her apartment after fights with him. Notably, on the morning of December 8th, just hours before her death, firefighters responded to a small blaze in her apartment. Official FDNY documentation listed the cause as open flame near bedding. It was deemed accidental. According to the building manager, Sylvie had appeared visibly shaken but declined hospital treatment. She left the apartment that afternoon, and surveillance footage confirmed that she returned briefly before leaving again around 9 p.m. That timeline would prove important. By 10:30 p.m., she had checked into Soho House with Brooks. It was the last confirmed sighting of her alive by any third party. Her credit card was used to pay for the room. Transaction logs showed a single-night reservation. The room was quiet until the water leak call just past midnight. From there, the case shifted rapidly from possible unattended death to active homicide investigation. While forensic examiners processed the bathroom and recovered trace samples from the tub, clothing, and linens, the second tier of the case focused on victimology. Sylvie Cachet was not in the wrong place at the wrong time. She knew the man she was with. She paid for the room. She let him in. The question was no longer whether someone had a reason to hurt her, but how and when that decision was made. Her autopsy report was not yet finalized, but early signs pointed away from overdose or accident. Preliminary toxicology showed no drugs beyond trace benzodiazepines, consistent with a prescription found in her purse. No alcohol was detected in lethal quantities. There was no blunt force trauma to the skull. But the bruising on her neck, the petechiae, and the position of her body contradicted any natural cause. It wasn't a case of what had happened. It was now a case of proving who had done it and why. The man last seen entering room 20 with Sylvie Cachet was identified through hotel registration records, surveillance footage, and confirmation from front desk staff. His name was Nicholas Brooks. He provided his driver's license upon check-in, and security footage time-stamped at 10:32 p.m. on December 8th showed him walking beside Sylvie into the hotel. Both appeared calm but did not speak to each other at the check-in desk. The reservation was under her name. The room was paid with her credit card. Nicholas Brooks, age 24, had no fixed occupation. Background checks revealed no current employment history, no active business licenses, and no payroll filings for the past 3 years. He was the son of Joseph Brooks, a once famous composer who had won an Academy Award in the 1970s. More recently, the elder Brooks had been under investigation for a series of alleged sexual assaults tied to fraudulent casting calls, a fact that did not directly implicate Nicholas, but was not dismissed by investigators. Nicholas was living between addresses at the time of Sylvie's death. He had no lease, no utility bills in his name, and no steady mailing address. Instead, he floated between short-term rentals, gyms with 24-hour access, and hotel rooms booked by acquaintances or family members. He kept no permanent residence of record. His phone, an iPhone 3GS, was registered to a family account with billing statements sent to his father's Manhattan apartment. When detectives interviewed Nicholas on December 9th at the precinct, he initially appeared composed. He stated he had last seen Sylvie around 2 a.m. when she was half asleep in the hotel room. He claimed he left briefly to get air and walk around. He returned several hours later to find the floor taped off by police. His explanation lacked specifics. When asked where he went during those 3 hours, he stated he didn't remember exact locations, but probably walked down to a bar or might have called a friend. That answer triggered a standard subpoena for cell tower records. The phone logs from the early hours of December 9th showed multiple pings from locations spanning more than 20 blocks. Between 2:15 a.m. and 5:30 a.m., his phone moved across Lower Manhattan and appeared near a bar on Ludlow Street, then circled back to Soho House. There were no incoming or outgoing calls during that period. However, text message activity was recorded, including 2 brief exchanges with a contact saved as Jules and another labeled AV. One of the messages, sent at 3:19 a.m., read, "Still out. Might crash at someone's place. Tired." The recipient did not respond. Another message, sent at 4:06 a.m., simply read, "Can I come through?" No address followed. This pattern matched behavioral descriptions given by acquaintances: impulsive movements, erratic contact, and a tendency to appear unannounced at apartments of women he had met briefly or casually dated. Investigators turned to financial records. Sylvie's credit card had been used 3 times in the 5 days prior to her death. 2 charges were for online escort services, one billed at $600 and another at $1,100. Both were time-stamped in the early morning hours, during time windows when Sylvie was not logged into her own devices. IP addresses traced to Nicholas's known login activity confirmed he had accessed her accounts. This alone did not constitute violence, but it confirmed unauthorized use of funds. Sylvie had confronted him about these charges in messages recovered from her phone. Her language was direct and unambiguous. Detectives interviewed multiple friends who had seen the couple interact. One friend reported an incident at a dinner party 2 weeks prior where Sylvie appeared tense and on edge. When asked privately, she told the friend that Nicholas had drained her bank account and locked her out of a shared device. She had not gone to the police, reportedly stating she didn't want to make things worse. In the days leading up to her death, Sylvie had sent emails to a friend and to her mother expressing plans to end the relationship. The email to her mother, timestamped the morning of December 8th, read in part, "This is over. He used me and I've had enough. If anything happens, please know I'm not okay right now." It was not flagged at the time as a threat of harm, more of a declaration of emotional exhaustion, but in hindsight, it carried weight. On the night of the fire in her apartment, less than 24 hours before her death, Nicholas had been present. FDNY report hash 1015,429 listed the cause as open flame near bed linens. No accelerants were found. However, a cigarette lighter was recovered from the bedroom floor, and Nicholas was listed in the building's log as having entered around 6 p.m. that evening. The shift from her apartment to Soho House was sudden. According to the building concierge, Sylvie left in a rush carrying only a small bag. She did not return that night. NYPD investigators requested Soho House's full security footage from the main entrance, elevators, and hallway outside room 20. At 12:32 a.m., Nicholas was recorded leaving the room alone. He did not appear distressed. He walked slowly down the corridor, glanced at his phone, and entered the elevator. He did not return to the building until 5:29 a.m., when he approached the front desk and asked, "Is something wrong with our floor?" At that point, the scene had already been secured as a death investigation. In his second interview, Nicholas repeated that he did not remember where he went. He denied any argument or altercation with Sylvie. When asked why he didn't call or text her during the hours he was away, he said, "She was probably asleep. I didn't want to wake her." The interview was suspended pending further forensic analysis. Investigators now had to determine whether the circumstantial timeline could be tied to physical evidence. Any DNA, fibers, or fingerprints that could explain the injuries later confirmed by autopsy. They also had to determine whether the fire the previous day, though ruled accidental, was a missed signal, part of a chain of escalation that no one saw coming in time. At 7:48 a.m. on December 9, 2010, the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner in Manhattan officially took custody of Sylvie Cachet's remains. The transport log listed her as a 33-year-old female, deceased in a hotel bathroom under suspicious circumstances. A full autopsy was scheduled within 24 hours. Preliminary notes were provided to NYPD Homicide by early afternoon. External examination revealed no signs of sharp force trauma, no gunshot wounds, no ligature impressions around the wrists or ankles. However, closer analysis of the neck area revealed multiple contusions. A faint linear abrasion, approximately 4 centimeters in length, was found on the left side of the upper neck, just below the angle of the jaw. There were smaller petechial hemorrhages noted in the conjunctiva of both eyes and in the mucosa of the inner lips, consistent with restricted airflow prior to death. There were no broken bones, no visible skull fractures. Toxicology samples were collected immediately. The position of the body in the tub raised immediate concern. Sylvie had been found lying face down, partially submerged, with her legs bent unnaturally and one arm draped over the edge. The faucet had remained open long after the time of death, as confirmed by hotel maintenance staff. The water was still running when security entered. Investigators concluded that the overflow may have occurred hours earlier, somewhere between 2 o'clock and 2:30 a.m. The autopsy team documented early rigor mortis and mild lividity on the anterior portion of the body. These observations aligned with the theory that she had been placed or remained face down for an extended period of time. There were no visible defensive wounds, no broken fingernails, no bruising on the forearms. However, one distinct bite mark was noted on the upper portion of her right hand. The skin was broken. Forensic swabs were collected for DNA analysis. Clothing worn by the victim included a gray wool turtleneck, red lace underwear, and a gold Rolex watch still fastened to her left wrist. There were no signs of forced removal. Her jeans were found neatly folded on the floor next to the tub, along with her shoes. No towel had been used. The room's wastebasket contained a single tissue with a faint reddish stain, later determined to be blood consistent with her DNA profile. The forensic team examined room 20 in detail. Luminol tests returned negative for large blood traces, suggesting no significant bleeding occurred outside the tub. However, trace samples were lifted from the bathroom floor, including several strands of long dark hair and one short light brown strand inconsistent with the victim's known hair color. Fingerprints were recovered from multiple surfaces. The outer bathroom doorknob, the sink, and the toilet handle all contained partial prints matching Sylvie. 2 additional latent prints lifted from the edge of the bathtub did not match hers. One of those prints would later be confirmed through AFIS as belonging to Nicholas Brooks. From a forensic standpoint, the physical evidence was subtle but cumulative. The lack of defensive wounds did not preclude assault. The bruising on the neck, paired with petechial hemorrhaging and the position of the body, indicated asphyxiation likely occurred before submersion. That timeline, if proven, would rule out accidental drowning as a cause of death. The final autopsy report was signed and certified on December 14th. The cause of death was listed as asphyxia by neck compression with contributory drowning. Manner of death, homicide. With the autopsy complete, attention turned to the digital evidence timeline. The last confirmed activity on Sylvie's phone occurred at 12:17 a.m. when she opened a news article from a browser app. There were no further keystrokes, texts, or calls. Her phone remained on the bedside table, screen down, until it was recovered at 1:04 a.m. by police. Meanwhile, Nicholas Brooks's phone showed no outgoing activity between 2 a.m. and 5:30 a.m., but tower pings placed him in motion during that time. When cross-referenced with security footage, investigators confirmed that his departure from the hotel occurred at 12:32 a.m., approximately 15 minutes after Sylvie's last digital interaction. A review of hallway camera footage from 12:31 a.m. shows Nicholas exiting the room without any visible signs of stress. His clothing was dry, he carried no visible bags. His return footage at 5:29 a.m. shows him re-entering the hotel, speaking briefly to a staff member and asking whether there was a problem upstairs. That same morning, detectives re-interviewed hotel employees. A night shift housekeeper recalled seeing Nicholas alone in the hallway around 12:30 a.m. He appeared calm, made no mention of any issue in the room, and exited without requesting help. No complaints had been logged by him. Back in the lab, DNA tests returned from the bite mark swab. The sample was consistent with a male profile. When compared to a cheek swab taken from Nicholas during a voluntary interview, the result was a match. Combined with the partial fingerprint on the tub and his unexplained departure, the investigative theory began to solidify. One more discovery pushed the timeline into focus. A secondary towel, found inside the cabinet below the bathroom sink, contained traces of sweat and epithelial cells. That towel had not been used by Sylvie. Her fingerprints were not found on it. But Nicholas's were. The working hypothesis was now supported by three elements: biological evidence of force, neck bruising and hemorrhaging, digital inactivity following Nicholas's exit, and multiple pieces of physical evidence tying him to the scene at a critical time. Still, detectives had to be cautious. Physical proximity alone was not enough. They needed to tie motive, opportunity, and action in a clear chain of custody. They returned to the one thing that had not yet been fully examined: the events that occurred immediately before the check-in, particularly the fire. On the afternoon of December 8th, less than 12 hours before her body was discovered in a Manhattan hotel, Sylvie Cachet had reported a fire in her West Village apartment. The incident occurred at approximately 3:20 p.m. and was documented under FDNY Incident Report #1015,429. The responding fire crew, Engine 5, reported a small flame localized to the bedding in the primary bedroom. No one was injured. The fire was extinguished within minutes. The apartment, located at 59 Jane Street, was not equipped with sprinkler activation, but the smoke detector functioned properly. Firefighters described the scene as contained and noted that a scented candle, unattended, was the likely cause. No accelerants were found. The fire was officially logged as accidental. But the sequence of events and context surrounding the fire raised concerns. According to the building's front desk log, Nicholas Brooks had entered the premises at 2:43 p.m., using the guest call system from the lobby. He was buzzed in by Sylvie. Security camera footage confirmed his arrival. At 3:15 p.m., tenants in neighboring units reported a smell of smoke. At 3:18 p.m., a call was placed to 911 from Sylvie's phone. She identified herself and stated, "My bed's on fire, it's spreading fast." The dispatcher asked if anyone else was present. She responded, "Yes, but he's helping." That was the only mention of another individual. When firefighters arrived, Nicholas was seen exiting the building and did not approach responders. He did not speak to the crew or return to the scene while they worked. His absence was noted by a member of the fire team and entered into a post-incident report as an unidentified male, possibly resident. The name was never provided at the time. After the fire was extinguished, Sylvie declined medical attention. She was visibly shaken. According to Fire Captain Angelo Ruiz, she said she had barely made it out of the bedroom. There were no signs of electrical failure. The only ignition source identified was a half-melted candle in a glass container, located beside the bed. Detectives reviewing the timeline began to consider whether the fire was simply an accident or an event meant to induce panic. The apartment had no major property damage, but Sylvie left shortly afterward and did not return. At 5:22 p.m., she sent a message to a friend reading, "I can't stay here tonight. Everything's wrong." That same friend later confirmed that Sylvie had called and said, "He scared me. Something's off." Digital records showed that at 6:07 p.m., Sylvie booked a one-night stay at Soho House. The reservation was made in her name, paid in full by her credit card, and listed for 2 guests. Internal emails from the hotel's reservation system showed that she had requested a quiet corner room, preferably away from the elevators. Detectives reviewed the fire scene again on December 10th. A second inspection was conducted by the NYPD Arson and Explosion Squad at the request of the Manhattan DA's office. The conclusion remained the same: no chemical accelerants, no evidence of tampering with electrical wiring. However, the burn pattern on the mattress indicated that the flame had originated beneath the blanket layer, not from the top surface where the candle sat. This detail suggested a change in interpretation. While a candle near fabric can ignite bedding, fire experts noted that it is unusual for the flame to spread downward before igniting upwards. In normal conditions, a candle would ignite the top layer first, not produce a heat source underneath the covers. Investigators could not conclusively determine how the flame moved. No charges were filed regarding the fire, but the anomaly was added to the cumulative profile. Phone records indicated Nicholas made no 911 call during the incident. He also never contacted building management afterward. Surveillance footage showed that after leaving the building around 3:30 p.m., he did not return. At 6:14 p.m., his phone pinged from a different part of Lower Manhattan, near Delancey Street. Meanwhile, Sylvie made several calls from her phone between 5 o'clock and 7:30 p.m., including 2 to her mother and 1 to a former coworker. Voicemails left on both devices expressed distress. In one message, she said, "I'm not okay. I'm scared of what's happening. I need to be away from him." These calls were not returned until the following morning, when news of her death had already spread. Detectives requested a forensic analysis of the fire-damaged bedding. No foreign DNA was recovered, but 2 synthetic fibers were found beneath the scorched area that did not match the mattress or blankets. The fibers were consistent with clothing typically used in athletic wear, specifically polyester-blended sweatpants. Investigators could not confirm origin, but images pulled from surveillance footage earlier in the week showed Nicholas wearing similar clothing during a visit to the building. While the fire itself could not be definitively ruled as intentional, it created an observable shift in Sylvie's behavior. She abandoned her apartment, expressed fear to friends, and moved quickly to secure temporary lodging. Her request for a hotel room, made before 6:30 p.m., reflected clear intent to separate herself from Nicholas for the night. Yet despite this, she still checked into the hotel with him. The decision puzzled investigators. It also shifted attention to a second possibility. Was Sylvie coerced into maintaining proximity that night? If so, was the fire a catalyst for that coercion? NYPD homicide flagged the pattern: emotional control, financial misuse, isolation, and eventual death, as consistent with high-risk relationship escalation. Case notes from the lead investigator referenced a growing concern over pre-incident stressors, identifying the fire as a possible psychological manipulation tactic rather than a simple accident. The case file was updated with a new timeline. 2:43 p.m. Nicholas enters Jane Street apartment. 3:15 p.m. Fire breaks out in bedroom. 3:18 p.m. 911 call placed. 3:30 p.m. Nicholas exits the building, does not return. 5:22 p.m. Sylvie sends messages indicating fear. 6:07 p.m. Hotel reservation made. 10:32 p.m. Couple checks into Soho House. 12:17 a.m. Sylvie's last phone activity. 12:32 a.m. Nicholas exits room 20. What remained was the link between the emotional spiral triggered by the fire and the homicide that followed. Forensic evidence placed Nicholas at the scene of death. The motive remained circumstantial but increasingly coherent. Next, detectives prepared to present their findings to the district attorney's office for consideration of charges. On December 15, 2010, 6 days after Sylvie Cachet's body was found in a hotel bathtub, the NYPD Homicide Division delivered its completed investigative summary to the Manhattan District Attorney's Office. The case file contained over 200 pages of compiled evidence: crime scene photographs, full autopsy results, digital forensic reports, financial records, surveillance timestamps, and statements from 23 individuals connected to the victim and the suspect. The case had moved from speculative to prosecutable. The decision to pursue charges hinged not on a single piece of evidence, but on accumulation. The autopsy confirmed cause of death as asphyxia due to neck compression, with drowning listed as a contributing factor. Manner, homicide. DNA collected from the bite mark on Sylvie's hand matched Nicholas Brooks. His partial fingerprint was recovered from the rim of the bathtub. Surveillance footage placed him inside room 20 during the victim's time of death, followed by a gap in his whereabouts for over 3 hours. The timeline was critical. According to the compiled digital records, Sylvie's last phone use occurred at 12:17 a.m. Nicholas exited the room at 12:32 a.m. Her body was discovered at 1:04 a.m. during a hotel staff response to a water leak. Brooks re-entered the building at 5:29 a.m., long after her time of death and well after the police response had begun. No 911 call was placed by him. No efforts were made to inform hotel staff of any emergency. When questioned, he could not provide a consistent account of his whereabouts during the window of death. Investigators presented the case to Assistant District Attorney Jordan Arnold, a prosecutor with prior experience in complex homicide and domestic violence cases. The focus was on building a clean narrative from traceable facts. The prosecution strategy would rely on motive, opportunity, and physical presence, supported by forensic science and behavioral escalation. On December 16, 2010, a formal arrest warrant was approved by the court. Nicholas Brooks was taken into custody at his father's Upper East Side residence at 6:42 a.m. without incident. He was read his rights, transported to the first precinct, and placed under observation. During booking, Brooks declined to answer questions. No attorney was present. No formal statement was given. He was charged with second-degree murder under New York Penal Law Section 125, based on intent to cause death and commission of a reckless act resulting in death. Bail was denied at arraignment, citing risk of flight, inconsistent testimony, and the nature of the evidence. He was remanded to Rikers Island pending trial. The indictment detailed the following evidentiary points: autopsy findings, death by neck compression, consistent with manual strangulation. Bruising patterns indicated pressure applied from behind and slightly above the victim's shoulder line. DNA evidence. Saliva-derived DNA on the victim's right hand matched Nicholas Brooks with a statistical probability of 1 in 3.1 billion. No other male DNA was found in trace samples from the bathroom. Fingerprint evidence. A latent print recovered from the tub's rim matched Brooks. No other usable prints were found on the faucet, but partial smudges consistent with a recent cleaning attempt were present. Surveillance footage hotel video placed the defendant at the scene at the time of death, with no footage of any other individual entering or exiting room 20 during that window. Behavioral indicators. Defendant failed to call emergency services, delayed returning to the scene, and gave conflicting explanations for his whereabouts. Financial motive. Brooks had used Sylvie's credit card for escort services days prior. Texts recovered from her phone showed clear conflict over financial exploitation. Psychological escalation. The fire incident at Sylvie's apartment, previously ruled accidental, was now considered a prelude event tied to her emotional withdrawal from the relationship. This shift preceded her death by less than 10 hours. The prosecution avoided overreaching. There was no confession, no eyewitness, and no murder weapon, but intent could be inferred by proximity, silence, and physical evidence. By January 2011, a grand jury formally indicted Nicholas Brooks on one count of second-degree murder. His defense team, led by attorney Jeffrey Schwartz, issued a statement declaring his innocence and signaling their intention to challenge the autopsy and chain of custody protocols. They would argue that Sylvie's death was accidental or self-inflicted, and that Brooks had left the room before anything occurred. The strategy hinged on raising reasonable doubt. The prosecution, in contrast, built its case on eliminating other possibilities. Assistant DA Arnold emphasized the calculated nature of the evidence: no forced entry, no robbery, no defensive injuries. Sylvie was not attacked by a stranger. She had checked in with the man who would later leave her in a flooded room, unresponsive, with no explanation and no call for help. As the trial date was scheduled, prosecutors continued refining expert testimony, particularly around the cause of death. Forensic pathologists prepared to testify on the specificity of the neck trauma and the position of the body. A digital analyst reconstructed the phone and movement data. The case would be technical, but grounded in traceable events. At this stage, media interest grew. Headlines described the case as a Soho House homicide and focused on the contrast between Sylvie's professional career and the hidden instability in her personal life. Coverage remained careful but persistent, especially after it became public that Brooks was the son of an already disgraced figure. The defense filed a motion to suppress the bite mark DNA on grounds of collection procedure, but the judge ruled it admissible after reviewing chain of custody logs and lab documentation. As both sides prepared for trial, the prosecution's goal was clear: show not just how Sylvie died, but why the evidence ruled out any version of events other than intentional homicide by someone she trusted enough to let into her hotel room. The trial of People v. Nicholas Brooks opened in June 2013 at the New York State Supreme Court in Manhattan. Nearly 2.5 years had passed since Sylvie Cachet's death. During that time, the prosecution had built a case grounded in forensic reconstruction, behavioral profiling, and a digital timeline too precise to ignore. The defense strategy, in contrast, relied on interpretation, an attempt to reframe the physical evidence as circumstantial and the death as tragic, but accidental. Jury selection lasted 3 days. 12 jurors and 2 alternates were seated. Opening statements began on June 6th. Assistant District Attorney Jordan Arnold addressed the panel first, laying out the case in a single line. She was found face down in a tub wearing a turtleneck and a watch. She didn't drown by mistake. Arnold outlined the forensic findings, digital records, and post-mortem bruising consistent with manual strangulation. He emphasized that Sylvie had been planning to leave the relationship and had voiced concern to multiple people. Her final hours were not random. The defense countered with a narrative centered on misinterpretation. Lead attorney Jeffrey Schwartz told jurors there was no proof of a murder, only a tragedy. He stated that Sylvie may have taken prescription medication, suffered a medical episode in the bath, or slipped. He questioned whether the neck bruising could have come from resuscitative efforts or from movement after death. Schwartz argued that while Nicholas's behavior was immature, it did not constitute intent or guilt. Over the next 2 weeks, testimony was delivered by 23 witnesses. Medical examiners confirmed their conclusion: death by asphyxiation with drowning secondary. The bruising patterns on the neck were too symmetrical and localized to be incidental. There was no water in the stomach, a detail consistent with post-mortem submersion. Forensic pathologist Dr. Jonathan Hayes explained that the presence of petechiae and a lack of defensive wounds suggested the victim may have been subdued quickly, possibly caught off guard. The jury also heard from Sylvie's close friends, who testified about her fear and plans to leave the relationship. One recounted a voicemail from December 8th where Sylvie said, "I don't feel safe. He doesn't let me go." The statement, while emotionally charged, was admitted by the court to demonstrate state of mind. Surveillance footage from Soho House was played in court, frame by frame. Jurors watched Nicholas Brooks exit room 20 alone at 12:32 a.m., walk calmly to the elevator and leave the building. The video was time-stamped 15 minutes after Sylvie's last confirmed phone use. He did not return until over 3 hours later, offering no explanation for where he had been. The prosecution highlighted that he had never called 911, never asked hotel staff for help, and never checked on her again. Cross-examination attempted to cast doubt on the quality of forensic preservation and lab protocols. The defense challenged the integrity of the DNA collection from the bite mark and the reliability of fingerprint lifting on a wet porcelain surface. They introduced their own expert to suggest that drowning alone, not strangulation, may have caused Sylvie's death. However, the prosecution rebutted each point with documented methodology. Chain of custody logs were shown. Photographs of the marks taken immediately post-mortem were compared with standard compression injury profiles. The jury was shown slides of the bruising depth relative to the soft tissue structure. The experts held their ground. On June 28th, closing arguments were delivered. The prosecution reminded jurors of 3 critical facts: the bite mark with matching DNA, the autopsy ruling of homicide by neck compression, and the suspect's failure to report or respond. The defense urged the jury not to convict on what they called a theory. Deliberations lasted less than 2 full days. On July 10, 2013, the jury returned a unanimous verdict: guilty of murder in the second degree. Sentencing was held in September. Nicholas Brooks, then 27 years old, was sentenced to 25 years to life in prison. He showed no visible reaction as the sentence was read. No family members of the defendant addressed the court. The victim's mother, seated in the gallery, wept quietly but remained composed. In her written victim impact statement read aloud by the prosecutor, she wrote, "My daughter was talented, generous, and trusting. That trust was used against her in the most cowardly way." The case was formally closed. Nicholas Brooks was remanded to the custody of the New York State Department of Corrections. He is currently incarcerated at Sullivan Correctional Facility and will be eligible for parole in 2038. Public reaction to the verdict reflected both relief and frustration. While justice was served in legal terms, Sylvie's death reminded many of how quickly emotional manipulation and silent coercion can escalate into lethal outcomes. Domestic violence advocates noted that Sylvie had not filed formal complaints, but her messages and behavior reflected a clear pattern of psychological abuse. The case prompted renewed attention to non-physical abuse as a warning sign. Control over money, digital surveillance, isolation, and impulsive outbursts were all present in her relationship. The absence of physical violence before the final act contributed to the lack of early intervention. Fashion industry colleagues created a scholarship fund in Sylvie Cachet's name, aimed at supporting women pursuing independent design careers. The Sila Foundation has since provided grants to over 24 emerging designers. The Soho House quietly removed Room 20 from its public booking system. It now functions as an internal storage suite. There is no plaque, no public marker. Only archived court transcripts and a closed file in the Manhattan DA's records, documenting a case that began with water leaking through a ceiling and ended with a young man sentenced to life. Before we close this case, I want to say something not as a narrator, but as someone who's lived, learned, and seen how quickly trust can turn into danger. If you're in a situation that feels wrong, even if there's no bruises, no yelling, listen to that feeling. Emotional control is still control. Silence is still violence. No one deserves to be slowly erased in a relationship they thought was safe. What do you think needs to change in how we talk about emotional abuse and early warning signs? Have you ever seen a friend ignore red flags? Let me know in the comments, and feel free to share what city you're watching from. If this video hit close to home or even just opened your eyes, please subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next story. And if it didn't resonate, I still want to know why. Let's keep the conversation real.